PS Audio FR10. One thing I was really curious about was, and I'll just be frank, PS Audio is kind of Paul is a little bit out there, man. Paul's a bit out there. Like I've seen some of his videos, and I'm like, oh, I don't know about all that. And then there was all that drama with ASR and PS
Mhm.
Audio, and I was like, this is really kind of silly.
Uh-huh.
But their speaker designer, Chris, he reached out a couple years ago and asked if I'd be interested in testing the FR30, and I just told him, I was like, man, it's too big. But we had chatted a couple times off and on, and it turns out that he knew me from DIY mobile audio back in the day, and we kind of like shared a couple little jokes and anecdotes about those times. And then I saw they came out with the FR10 like in November or so. So I
Mm.
reached out to him. I was like, I can actually test that. Would you mind sending that to me? So he sent it to me. But I was curious about, honestly, can they make a good speaker? You know, like, and it's not to say anything bad about Chris, but you know, PS Audio has a lot of hype behind it, and I really wanted to hear what they sounded like. And then measurements for me weren't necessarily that important for that particular speaker.
Mm.
I was more interested in hearing how that one sounded, and then the measurements came after the fact, and you know that'll all be out in a couple of days.
Mm.
Um, but then, like on something like the Kef Blade 2, I'd experienced them before, but never in my home, right? Like never in like a real home type setting. So I was really curious to see how they sounded, but also how I was going to find like a correlation between the measurements. So that's a case where I was really interested in both. Like I kind of had an idea of what I was going to hear, and I
Mm.
really wanted to know how that was going to relate to the measurements. And I was even talking to one of their engineers today. Like I kind of gave him a heads up. I was like, dude, I was able to measure it on the Clipple, and the results match your white paper. And I didn't tell him anything other than that. And I said, but I really love them. And I sent him the link to our chat about those speakers last
Mm.
week.
Uh-huh.
So he watched it and he replied back, kind of saying like, yeah, there's some things about these speakers that I don't quite know how to explain what those attributes align to in measurements just yet. And I was like, well, that's cool, you know, like to get that kind of feedback from one of their engineers. So yeah.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about different speakers is sometimes you'll find issues, right? But then there's
Yeah.
going to be something really good about it. Like you're saying that the mid bass was really awesome on that. And sometimes these things that it does really well kind of outweighs the things that it doesn't do well,
Yeah.
which lets you realize like maybe more companies should focus on this mid bass part, because I think a lot of people not, of course, try to minimize all the issues as much as you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that might be one thing if you had to make a trade-off to, maybe that's a better
Yeah.
trade-off.
Yeah. No, that's kind of what I was saying. Like the measurements for, I mean, I don't mind saying it here. The measurements for the FR10, there's a couple things that are like, these are $10,000. Like, why do they not look perfect?
Mm-hmm.
Right. But then there are two things that they do probably better than at least the majority, if not all of the other speakers that I'll listen to. That mid bass integration is just awesome. I don't know if that's the best I've ever heard, but it's definitely up there. But that radiation width and that soundstage is so freaking awesome, dude. Like, I would own those speakers almost solely for that. Honestly, like that's how much I appreciated having heard that. And so I'm looking at the measurements and I'm like, yeah, like there's a couple things in the measurements, but overall, it's a really good sounding speaker. So I'm curious how the community is going to respond to my review of that speaker. And I kind of expect there's going to be some negative people like, well, I can't believe you say they sound good when they measure like this. And it's like, yeah, but we've already proven that there are certain things in measurements that aren't as bad as other aspects. So, for example, like a narrow dip at 6 kilohertz is nowhere near as bad as a narrow peak at six kilohertz, right? Like it's not flat, and that kind of sucks. But I can deal with the dip because it's pretty narrow band, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the other things it does are fantastic. Now the Blade 2, oh my god, dude!
Okay, so
Like
real
that
quick,
is,
while you're on this one though, do you think the
yeah.
mid
Sorry.
bass is better because they use vented drivers?
No, my theory, and it's just a theory, is that it has a lot to do with the fact that they're close to the floor. And I talk about it in the video, kind of getting rid of that floor bounce. And I think that helps with that mid bass, like the attack is there, like that presence of that sound is there. But then I say that, and then I go and listen to like the Kef Blade 2 metas, and those are just like on another level on their own, right? Where the drivers are off the ground, almost like 3.5 feet or something like that.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely floor bounce from those. So then the question is, okay, now do I want the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the point source sound where all the mid bass drivers and the mid range and the tweeter are all in the same space, or would the speaker sound better if the woofers were on the floor like the PS Audio was?
Okay, so
Then it's just a
what
game of
happens to
trade-offs.
the floor bounce, the frequency where the floor bounce happens? What happens as
Yeah.
you move it higher off the ground? Right. So
Yeah,
low,
so
what happens, and then versus you move it up, 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 up. Right. What happens as you
yeah,
move it up?
so the closer you move something to its reflecting point, the higher in frequency you move that reflection up, and you can basically get it up so high that it's out of the pass band of it, right?
Mm.
So if they cross, if you have a floor bounce at 300 hertz because of where the speaker is positioned, like up eye level or ear level or so, and then you move it down, well, then moving it down, you're shifting that frequency. I believe it's up. Now I'm starting to wonder, am I right here? I believe it's up. I have to
It's
think back.
similar to the SBIR effect, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So
So
I don't know which one it is, if it's up or down, but you just want it out of the range.
yeah,
Out
so
of
it
range.
moves out of the pass band. Yeah, it moves up in frequency. Yeah. So you get it out of the pass band that that speaker is playing, and then you don't have that null there. But the downside of that is that you don't have that vertical directivity match between the mid range and the mid bass, because now there's further separation of those two drivers. And when all the drivers are co-located, everything sounds like a point source. But when they're not, it's harder to make it sound like a point source. So that's a trade-off, right? They're two totally different
Mm.
design principles, but they both sound very good in their own right. And trying to separate like what it is that makes this thing sound better
Mm.
is really hard. And that's why I say, like, I think that the PS Audio, that mid bass, lower mid range area, sounds so good because it's close to the floor. And the only thing that I really had to go on is experience based on hearing, I don't know, hundreds of other speakers at this point where they don't have that. And I don't notice that it sounds as good in that region, you know?
Okay, so how about this? If moving it closer to the boundary moves the frequency up, then moving it away
Moves it,
lowers
lowers it. Yeah.
lowers. Okay, so at what distance would you have to raise a speaker away from the boundary where it's lower than the pass band? Is that way too
Oh,
far? Is
yeah.
it
Yeah, you're talking like really, because that pass band for it would be for a mid bass is what I'm talking about.
okay?
And if you're talking like a mid range, then you can also go higher with it too, right? And bring that null down into a lower frequency where it's out of its pass band too.
Yeah, but
So
no go with actual bass units.
I don't think so. No,
Because
I'd
I
have to.
mean, typically they say move the speaker about 3 feet away from the wall,
Yeah,
right? Like that's the typical distance that
right.
they recommend. It's either like in wall,
Mm-hmm.
or 3 feet away is kind of like a good distance. Are those woofers on the KEF about 3 feet above or not that high?
Yeah, they're about 3.5 maybe
Does
ballpark.
that have the same effect as it being 3 feet away from the rear wall? I
Um,
know that's silly
yeah,
questions, you know.
but it's a yeah, no, it does. I mean, it's kind of, when you're talking about a room, everything's a little bit different, but it's basically the same. I mean, a reflection is going to be pretty much the same.
Hmm.
So I'm still trying to think, am I saying that right? Because now I'm like, oh, is that right? I don't want to
Man, you're in the car.
misspeak
Don't
here.
worry about it. This is not on your channel. We do a live stream every Monday
Yeah, I
where
know, but you
we
know
just, we
me.
just talk
I'm
and
bugging right now. I'm like, is that right? I think it moves it lower when you move it closer to the ground. Or did I say higher?
maybe somebody else could say, maybe somebody else here knows for sure.
I need to think about that for a second. If I'm
Yeah, I'll let you.
further away from the wall. My brain is not thinking right now, dude.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you probably went to work today,
Yeah.
Monday.
I did know this at one point, but now my brain is like, I don't think so.
Let me ask ChatGPT. What should I ask it? I should ask if you move a speaker away from a nearby boundary, what happens to the, what should I say? Cancellation frequency? That's
Oh
probably
yeah. Yeah.
As you move it closer or further. Let's see if it knows. Sometimes it has the wrong answer.
Yeah. If you move it closer, it shifts that frequency up. If you move it further, it shifts it down. So I'm trying to think, was I saying that right when I was telling you? If you move it down, it moves that frequency. Yeah, that's right. I'm sticking by it.
This thing doesn't know.
Okay.
The intensity. Cancel it because the phase shift between the or wave distance, the frequency at which cancel is move the speaker further away can align different frequencies with points of constructive or destructive. It seems kind of right, but I don't know. I wouldn't trust it.
Yeah, we'll come back to it.
All right, everybody. We do the Daily Hi-Fi podcast every Monday, 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So make sure you join up to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Daily Hi-Fi, and we will see you there for the big show every Monday. Yeah.